Hello, I'm John Johnson. I'm a printmaker from Riverton, Connecticut. Just thought I'd tell you a little bit about my artwork, my process, what inspired me. Going way back when I was young, I always loved creating artwork, but my real passion while I was in college was printmaking. My printmaking teacher, Gus Mazzocco, was really a big inspiration to me. I really gravitated towards the printmaking process. Creating your image on a lithostone or carving it out of a block of wood, painting it on a monotype panel, and then getting that paper on there and pulling the print off of the stone or the plate, and the magic of that print coming off was just really something that appealed to me. I also like the way that you could replicate things and attempt to print a consistent edition of prints. That's always a challenge. There's so many things that can go wrong to try to get a consistent edition. Primarily I do relief printmaking, and relief printmaking means you take away what you don't want to show up on your artwork, and then you roll ink onto the plate, linoleum block or wood block, put your paper on it, run it through the press and pull it off, and that's the impression you get. Well, if you do multiple colored relief prints, with every successive color you carve away more and more. Typically you start with the lighter colors, you print your entire edition with the light colors, carve away some more, ink your block with a medium tone, superimpose that over the lighter color, and then for the last color, if you're only doing 3, carve away everything but the details and then put the darkest ink on there. So here's an example of a reduction block print. This was actually carved out of a piece of linoleum. Here's the plate or the block of linoleum. You can see some of the chisel marks. Ink is rolled onto the block or the plate. The paper is laid on that and run through a printing press, and you pull it off and you end up with an impression on your paper. Unlike drawing and painting, which is a really direct process, you're getting the energy of the paint, you're putting down bold marks. Printmaking is a little different. It's a more methodical process. There's a lot of planning involved to try to figure out how am I going to achieve what I'm trying to do. So in this case, I was trying to achieve some light colors, some medium colors, and some dark colors, all creating this one image. I started off with this same block, but did not carve anything. It was just a plain piece of linoleum with no carving on it. And I inked the block with yellow up here, going to orange, going to light blue down here, and then took my roller and kind of blended the colors together, put the paper on it, ran the paper through the press, pulled it off, and it looked nothing like this. It just looked like yellow to orange to blue, and I printed the whole edition. I think I printed 15 like that. Then I wanted to add the middle color, which would be the green and the darker blue on the rocks here. So I carved away everything that's the brightest part. So I carved away the sky, I carved away the highlights in the water here, the highlights in the water here, and then I inked green ink on the top part of the plate and dark blue ink down here. And I did some blending to get the colors to blend. Took those same prints that I had printed 15 of, put the paper on the plate, ran it through the press again, pulled it off, and now it's starting to build. It's starting to look like something, but it still doesn't look like what I want it to look like. You have the challenge of lining everything up. It's called registration, to have the bottom color and the other colors that come after it line up right so you don't have a lot of offset. Took the block and carved away everything but the darkest. So what you see is black here. That was all that's left on this plate, is what was black. I rolled the black ink out and then ran all the prints through for the last and final round of impression. At the end of it, out of 15 prints, I think I got about 4 acceptable to me. The success rate for that specific edition wasn't ideal. Sometimes I do much better. Out of 15 I could get 12 or 13 good ones. It just varies, and it's frustrating, but it adds to the magic of it when you actually get it to work and you pull that print off and the colors are the way you want them, everything's lined right, the solid colors are nice and solid. So that's the typical technique for a relief print. I have done reduction prints that were the opposite, but unlike the last one where you start with the light color and add the darker colors as you go, this was just the opposite. I didn't carve anything away from the block. It was just a solid piece of linoleum. I inked the dark sort of charcoal gray, black, printed the whole edition with the dark background. Then I carved away everything but what's left on the block here, and I inked it creatively with different colors and gradations, using a smaller roller and kind of blending the colors together. Used that print that was just the black ink on the paper, put it on the plate, and superimposed the new brighter colors on it, and so it has a different feel to it. So another way to get color into your images is to hand color. So this is an example of a hand colored print. Printed a black and white, all black ink on paper, and then hand colored it with watercolors. This is the block, and you can see how it's a mirror image of the print. It's always something to consider when you're doing your artwork. If it's important to you that the print is the way that you want it to appear, you need to draw your image backwards on your plate, because once you ink it, put the paper on it, and pull the print off, it's going to flop the image. After drawing the image on the block with a Sharpie and carving it away, I rolled out some black ink, dropped the paper on it, and ran it through the press bed. That was a really great moment when I pulled that first print off of a giant piece of wood. I've never done a block print quite as big as this. So the inspiration from this came from a mountain biking trip I took out in Utah. The scenery out there is just spectacular. Took lots of photographs and came back, ended up doing several print editions based on what I saw on the trip. This is at Arches National Park in Utah. This one's called The Spectacles, for these two little things that kind of look like eyes, eyeglasses. My artwork's not super deep or intellectual. It's just inspired by my activities. I love to be out in nature. I do a lot of hiking, mountain biking, backcountry skiing, surfing. Good part of the imagery is based on me noticing something that I see when I'm out there and just stopping for a minute and saying, wow, this is really interesting and beautiful. Take photos and then look at them later and say, wow, this would make a good print. Typically, I don't just do exactly what the photo looked like, but I'll use it as a basis for the drawing, and maybe I'll add something. A close-up of a little salamander and mushrooms on the ground. Maybe the salamander and the mushroom really weren't in the same picture, but I combined them. Or if the surfer's coming out of the water and walking across the rocky coastline, maybe the surfer wasn't really there, but I added the surfer, but I got the waves in the background. So I tend to combine images and making it to make one composition. I find lots of inspiration just in getting out in nature. That's my biggest thing, I'd say. Recognizing the beauty that's around us and wanting to make artwork based on that. I've been also getting into other kinds of printmaking, which is much more direct, much more like painting, called monoprints. Basically, the idea is mono is one. You get one image from each one that you create, unlike a lithograph or a block print or an etching where you can do editions of 20, 30, 50, however many you want to do, and you can have many copies of the same image. Here's another example of a monoprint. This was a cutting from one of our house plants that I just rolled the green ink on it. I did the blue on the back on the plate first, wiped away a little bit, put a dot of orange, then I rolled green ink on the plant and dropped that onto the plate and ran it through the press and pulled it off. And it was kind of neat because it ends up with this white halo around everything, which I didn't know that was going to happen. This print is called Bee to the Blossom, inspired by a trip out to the garden, looking down on this lovely zinnia blossom and just really getting into the shapes of the blossom. And then I decided to put a bee in there too and use the shapes of the wings on the bee kind of echo the shapes of the flower petals, so it was a natural combination. This is an example of some really complicated inking. The first color was yellow with a little bit of orange blended in overall, and then I carved away some more, and then I printed the red to purple in the center, superimposed those on top, and then the final color was the darkest, almost black in the center, then that faded out to deep blue on the edges. So this is actually part of the same passes the darkest dark. This edition was another challenging one. I didn't get as many successful prints out of it as I would have hoped, but the ones that did come out came out pretty nicely. When you're drawing, you're painting, and you get that angst and that energy, you're totally focused on what you're doing. For me, in this case, it was when I was doing the inking. I remember with the roller just like, just having frothing and, trying to get those blends just right, and it's just so satisfying when you pull the print off and it came out the way you wanted it to.